Welcome to my positioning guide. In this video, I'll show you how to position with every single unit in the game. Positioning is very important in TFT. Not only will it decide close fights, but it can completely swing a matchup in another direction. Timestamps to every single unit is in the description. Caitlyn targets the farthest away unit, but her ult can be intercepted by other units. Generally, Caitlyn targets the unit in the opposite corner, so scout to see which side has the highest value targets on. To counter Caitlyn, position like this in the early game. If you're running her yourself, she will be your carry in the early game most of the time and can be a threat throughout the mid game. Fiora is more of a bruiser, meaning that she deals damage but is also a frontliner. She can be a threat with a cybernetic trait in the early game, but without that, she is too squishy to do anything. With her ult, she targets a random unit within her range, meaning that she doesn't necessarily ult whoever she is auto-attacking. During the mid game, she is commonly used as Blitzcrank or Infiltrator bait to keep another carry like Vayne safe. Graves targets the unit with the highest attack speed. Naturally, this makes him the best counter to Xayah in the early game. If you hold onto him to the late game, he's a great counter to auto-attack based units like Jhin, Jinx, and Vayne. He also works versus Shaco, Irelia, and Master Yi, but those units still do damage with their ultimates while blinded. How you position him has no impact on where he ults, but he is a frontliner and his spell wants to go off as early into the fight as possible. A 4-second stun to a carry at the start of the fight is essentially the same as severing them. Therefore, Graves wants to be targeted first, so he ults faster. During the early game, Fiora will always get blinded as her attack speed is 1.0 and the highest it can ever be in the early game. And Graves will always ult before Xayah, so make sure Fiora is split away from Xayah if you're running both of them. In this example, Xayah will get blinded, but if you move Fiora one to the right, she won't. Illaoi is a frontliner, and her spell has some value in the early game, but it's hard to get multiple people to get targeted due to the tentacle slam being too narrow. There are some scenarios like this where she will target Shen and therefore ult both him and Xayah, as she is right behind him, but most of the time you only get value from one unit. Jarvan buffs his entire team with attack speed, and the range of his ult is about 3 hexes from the one he's standing on. So you want to keep him on the same side as your carry. Typically in Shredder, he's kept very close to Xayah as she needs the attack speed from Jarvan to pop off. Same thing with Xerath in the late game. Here you still want Jarvan on the front line, but you want to have a straight line down to Xerath so that he can get the extra attack speed and do way more damage when he ults. There's not much to say about Leona and Malphite, they're both just tanks that get more tanky with their abilities. They are generally just positioned in the front line to eat damage or to get hooked by a Blitzcrank to make an enemy Jinx get slower resets. Nocturne provides great CC and can do damage if he has the Battlecast trait. He is an infiltrator, so he will always jump to the other side, so put him on the same side as where the enemy carries will be. Poppy's spell targets the farthest unit away. The damage the spell does can matter in the early game, as it can be enough to finish off an enemy carry that's been hit by another spell, but most of the time it doesn't matter too much. Since Poppy is a tank, we pretty much always want her in the front line. Twisted Fate targets a random enemy unit when he ults. Who he is attacking has no impact on where he throws his cards. In the early game, TF is usually your carry, and can be a secondary carry in the mid game, so protect him during these stages of the game. Xayah gets more attack speed from her ultimate. She's one of the best carries in the early game, and can also be a carry in the mid game. When you're positioning Xayah, make sure that you're protecting her from CC and not getting blinded by Graves. Ziggs' spell targets whoever he is currently auto-attacking. You just care about protecting him unless you have Demolitionist in. In that case, you want him to stun more dangerous targets like a Jayce in the early game or a Jarvan. If you keep him in the late game, you're most likely playing a Jinx comp. His role in those comps is to help Jinx get resets off. Jinx deals AD damage while Ziggs deals AP. This way you get resets faster, especially on Vanguards. Zoe targets whoever has the highest health percentage. This has low impact in the early game, but very high impact late game when she can stun a Jhin for 2.5 seconds. She will always target units with shields if they haven't taken damage yet. For example, Malphite will always get targeted by her if his shield is not broken through yet. She is usually used as Blitzcrank or Infiltrator bait throughout the entire game. Ahri's ult targets whoever she is currently auto-attacking. It goes in a straight line between her and the target and travels about 6 hexes depending on the angle. She can deal damage to multiple enemies if positioned correctly. In this example, both Malphites will attack Poppy, so the left one will walk down left. Ahri will target the one who is closest out of the two, which is the left Malphite. When she ults, the ball is wide enough to damage both Malphites and will also hit Xayah in any of these 3 spots. However, if Ahri is 1 hex to the left, her ult only damages 1 Malphite and 1 of the Xayahs. So always try to make her ult across multiple hexes. If you want to read more about how to position Ahri, I will link a Reddit post that goes more in depth about it. Ahri is a tank and her ability deals magic damage in a cone. In this example, her ult will hit Xayah, Jarvan, Shen and Rakan. Positioning her in front of big groups like this can get a lot of value, but if she's too squishy and doesn't ult, she just ends up getting shredded. Blitzcrank hooks the farthest away unit. This is usually going to be a unit in the corners. If positioned on the front row or left side, he will hook a unit in the cubbies. In this example, both the Lucians are getting hooked. A good positioning strategy is to leave a tank to get hooked by a Blitzcrank. Zephyr on Blitz is also very strong. In this example, Caitlyn will always get hooked if you're running Zephyr Blitz. Darius, although he is a melee unit, is not a tank. He is a carry. If he takes initial aggro from the enemy carry, he won't get to ult more than once during a fight. Generally, you want to have him second row so that he doesn't take a lot of damage. Also make sure he has space to walk up so he doesn't have to walk around your entire front line. You can also put him second row in the middle like this to play around Blitzcrank, or you can leave a tank in the back row like this as well. Nautilus stuns 1 target and all units adjacent to that target. This means that he can stun an important carry if they position them too far up. In this example, he can stun all 5 units on the left side, and he can stun the Lucian as well. This is very important if the carry in that spot is a Xayah or a Cassiopea, as you can stop their main source of damage for 3 seconds. General positioning with Nautilus in the early game wants to be like this, so that he gets targeted by tanks and therefore stuns all of them faster. Rakan's ability will knock up the farthest away units within his attack range plus 1 hex. This means he will stun someone 3 hexes away unless you put RFC on him. This means you can position him to knock up carries. This is how you should position to knock up Xayah in these 2 scenarios. Generally, if you're running Rakan, you want him to be second row so that he might get a chance to ult twice. Shen protects adjacent enemies and blocks all auto attacks coming in. This effectively stuns auto attack based carries like Xayah, Jhin, Irelia, Jinx and Vayne. You generally want those units to target a unit next to Shen so he doesn't get bursted down before he gets the chance to ult. In this example, Jhin will target Jarvan, and when Shen procs his ultimate, Jhin does 0 damage. In the second example, Xayah will target Leona and will do 0 damage once Shen ults. In the early game, you generally want Shen between the tanks so he protects both of them. Most of the damage in the early game is from auto attacks, as there aren't a lot of heavy hitting spells at that point in the game. Xin Zhao is a carry in the early and mid game. He is a bruiser, meaning that he can tank and also deal a lot of damage. When positioning him, you want him to not get bursted down by an enemy carry. In the late game, he becomes more of a frontliner. Yasou's ability targets the farthest away within attack range plus 2. This means that his ult works just like Rakan. Therefore, all the same tricks that works with Rakan works with Yasou. Zed's ability steals AD and deals magic damage. You want him to jump on the enemy carry, works really well against high AD champs like Xayah, Jhin. KogMaw is a carry you want to protect. His ult deals more damage versus high health targets like brawlers. Number 1 priority with him is to be protected, and after that, target the highest health targets. Mordekaiser's ult damages the units next to him. This damage matters a lot in the early game. Because of this, you want enemy tanks to target your Mordekaiser, so that they take damage from his ults. All units targets the closest unit. So in both of these examples, both enemy units will target the Mordekaiser, and the left one, Leona, might target the Poppy, but she will still be in range of the Mordekaiser ult. Ashe's ability stuns the targets it hits. She targets the farthest away unit, and stuns adjacent units. It also stuns for longer the longer the arrow travels. If you position your Ashe correctly, she can CC chain the enemy carry. In this example, she will always target Caitlyn, but the front line is in the way, resulting in Jarvan getting hit by the arrow. Here Jarvan, Xayah and Shen will get stunned. If you can't stun the enemy carry, you always want Ashe on the opposite sides of the big clumps of enemies. This is to both get more value out of the sniper buff and to make her arrow stun for longer. Bard is either used to farm XP or to be a mystic bot. If he's used for farming, you want to protect him, but don't prioritize protecting him more than your actual carry. If he is used as a Mystic bot, you generally want to frontline him, so that he gets killed after your first tanks die. Cassiopea usually wants to be second row because of her range. If she's your main carry, you can also turtle or box up in the backline. If you're putting your second row, you need to scout and look if she's in range of Rakan ults and Nautilus ults, etc. She also targets the nearest enemy that hasn't been poisoned yet. Therefore, keep her on the same side as the enemy carry. Ezreal's ability applies Mana Reaver to everyone that gets hit by the ability. Since it's random, you can't position Ezreal to target a specific unit. His ability is very powerful versus teams that need spellcasts to pop off. Those are comps like Star Guardians or Astro Snipers. So against those comps, make sure that Ezreal casts at least once. Jayce's ability deals damage to a unit and adjacent units. This is very powerful if people have put their carry on second row. You generally want to put Jayce in front of big groups of enemies to get as much value from the ult as possible. Karma's ability shields and gives attack speed to the unit she tethered at the start of the fight. She tethers whoever is closest to her. In this example, she will always tether Fiora as she is closer than Caitlyn is, and if multiple people are the closest, it's random. It's not always worth it to position worst just so you can make one specific unit get tethered. In this example, it is more important to turtle around Cassiopea and Soraka than it is to get Soraka tethered. Master Yi's ability heals him and deals true damage to whoever he is attacking. He is the primary carry in most 6BM comps and acts as a frontliner in Rebel comps. His ability is a huge counter to Vanguard Mystics as well as Shen ability. If he is your carry, you need to keep him safe, and he also doesn't want to be bursted down. He can take on long consistent damage, as he can heal back up, but versus a 4th shot Jhin, he just dies instantly most of the time. Neeko's ability stuns everyone within her attack range. This ultimate can be very powerful and can stun the entire enemy frontline in some cases. You generally never want her to be second row, she always wants to be front row. In this example, she is front row and all the Malphites get stunned. In the second example, she is second row, and if the Malphites on the sides don't walk, they don't get stunned. So her being front row lets her stun get a ton more value. Rumble is a big threat in the early game. He does a lot of damage. The flame from his ability reaches 3 hexes down, so in this example he will target the Malphite with the ultimate, but Lucian gets hit as well. Throw in Demolitionist and you have a huge AoE stun in your arsenal. A lot of people turtle or box up in the early game, and in those cases Rumble often gets a ton of value. In this example, he will walk down 1 or 2 hexes, and Lucian will be in range of his flame. Shaco's ability makes him drop aggro as well as doing a lot of damage. This means that if he is being attacked by an enemy, he will not get targeted after he ults as long as the enemy has someone else to attack. So in this example, Shaco will get targeted by everyone when he lands, and he might die before he gets to drop aggro. While in this example he has to drop aggro and keep attacking, as the other units will switch to the front line if they haven't already. Syndra's ability deals damage to the highest health percentage unit, and her next casts deal more damage than the previous ones. When positioning against Syndra, you want to keep as many units safe as possible, so that your carry doesn't get targeted right away. So try and not let other ranged units take damage so they can soak up the Syndra damage. Vayne's ability lets her drop aggro just like Shaco. This makes it very hard for infiltrators to kill her. When positioning Vayne, make sure that the infiltrators have someone else to attack, otherwise they will just walk away and then walk back to Vayne. Here Shaco goes to attack Leona after Vayne drops aggro, but if she's on her own, Shaco just walks back and forth to Vayne. Vi's ability targets the farthest away unit and CCs it. She works the same way as Blitzcrank. A nice combo if you're running brawlers is to put Vi and Blitz on the same side. In this example, Blitz hooks Karma, and then when Vi ults, she will target and CC the Jhin. Fizz's ult deals a lot of damage in a concentrated area. This is especially strong versus comps that want to group up. The CC the ultimate provides can also stop important ultimates, like Xerath's. You also want to position Fizz so that he jumps on an enemy carry or into big clumps of enemy to get a lot of value from his ult. Gnar ults whoever he is auto-attacking and throws all the units with him to the center of the map. In this example, he will ult the right Mordekaiser and throw both Karma and Jhin into the middle. This exposes the enemy carry, and Jhin gets less value from his sniper buff. Gnar can also be countered by infiltrators or Riven, as Riven dashes behind Gnar. If Gnar attacks either of these, he might end up ulting backwards and only throwing 1 or 2 units. Irelia is the best unit in the game to deal with infiltrators. She can also be a carry, but is very inconsistent due to her getting caught in a lot of the CC. Her ability makes her dash towards the enemy unit with the highest mana. It's very hard to position around and control where she will dash. If you do end up running her as a carry, stay away from Trap Claws and Bramble Vests, as well as all melee CC from units like Nautilus, Neeko, Shen, etc. Jhin's ability makes his 4th shot a critical hit, dealing a ton of damage. This can be countered by Bramble Vest as it negates all extra damage from critical hits. Therefore, when positioning Jhin, you want to stay away from Bramble Vests as well as Shen. Jhin also struggles to deal with infiltrators, especially if he gets stuck on a tank, so keep a unit on either side to help out if you can. Jinx's ability makes her ramp up and deal magic damage with her rockets once she gets 2 assists and/or kills. When Jinx is your carry, you need to position so that she targets the easiest units to kill first. Also playing Jinx enablers like Blitzcrank, Fizz and GP also helps. She gets countered by GA as she has to kill that unit twice for it to count, and she also gets countered by Shen as her auto attacks don't deal damage to him. You also want her not to attack units that move around a lot, as when they go out of range, she swaps to a different target. These are units like Vayne, Rakan, Gnar, and Wukong. Stay away from Vanguards if you don't have Last Whisper. You can only deal with Vanguards once her ultimate procs. Protectors have good sustain with their shields, so stay away from those as well if possible. In this example, the best unit for Jinx to focus is a Jayce if she has Last Whisper, and if she doesn't have Last Whisper, it's Blitzcrank. Riven has a different role in different types of comps. In comps like 6 BM, she is more of a tank, while in 6 Sorcerers, she is the frontline and a big part of the damage. When she is solo frontline, she wants to be in front of your carries, like Viktor and Xerath. While in comps like 6 BM, you want her to take damage from units that won't burst her down. Since her shields gives her consistent sustain, you don't want her to get targeted by any Jhins. Also stay away from Trap Claws if you can, as she will instantly get stunned by them. Soraka's ability heals the whole team. This ultimate is insanely valuable. You generally want to protect her as much as possible, but not more than your primary carry. Teemo is the best counter to comps that group up. He targets the closest unit, so you want him close to big clumps of enemies. In this example, Teemo will target Malphite, and the AoE from his shrooms will hit Jinx, Ziggs, and Blitz. But if he was on the right side, he would just hit Vi and Cho'Gath. Viktor's ability targets the 2 enemy units that are the farthest away from each other. You can only position against Viktor, so if you're running him yourself, protect him like any other carry. The longest line he will usually draw is this, so you can put unimportant units in both of those hexes. If you are running infiltrators, the longest line he can draw looks more like this. Here's an example of how you can position against Viktor in an Astro Snipers comp. The line gets drawn between Blitz and Karma. Both Teemo and Jhin stay safe, which is the most important part. You also want to try to avoid the backline laser. If you have Teemo and Jhin in each corner, he will often draw the line between those 2 units when your frontline starts dying. Wukong's ability makes him spin to the closest enemy and CC them. Once that enemy is CC'd, he goes to the next one. This makes him very efficient when it comes to CCing big piles of enemies. Wukong is a nice counter to comps that group up, like for example Rebels. Against those comps, he can potentially knock up their entire team with one ultimate. Asel is an interesting unit. Everything he does seems very random. Generally when positioning Asel, you can use him as Zephyr or Blitzcrank bait, as he has a built-in QSS that lasts forever. How Asel moves and paths around the map is actually not random, but it's too complex to go over in this video, so if you want to learn more about it, here's a Reddit post that goes super in depth. His role in a comp is everything from a frontliner to a main carry depending on which comp he is in. Against comps that really want to cast their spells, you want to keep him alive so he keeps draining mana from them. And against comps that have mystics and are not reliant on spellcasts, he acts more as a tank. Echo's ability targets the unit with the highest attack speed and cuts it in half. When positioning him, it's more about letting his ult go off rather than dealing damage with auto attacks. So make sure your Echo jumps somewhere where he doesn't get killed before he ults. QSS counters Echo's ult. This is because the attack speed slow doesn't apply to QSS. This can also result in a unit getting hit 9 times by the Echo ult and dying. GP is a unit that can deal a lot of damage and or apply a ton of CC with Demolitionist. If he has GA, which is the best item you can put on him, you want him to be solo frontline. This is because all the other units will funnel in towards him and get in range of his ultimate. Here both Xayah and Jinx will walk up and get stunned by his ultimate. If you don't have GA, you generally can't have GP solo frontline as he'll die before his ult goes off. Janna's ultimate provides great CC as well as buffing your team with attack speed. You want her next to units that are dependent on high attack speed like Xayah or Jinx. You always want to corner Janna if you can, as she will get a much better ultimate angle from here. If you position her in the middle, she might completely miss your carries and that can make or break a fight. Lulu's ability is to polymorph the 2 or 4 closest targets depending on whether she's 2 or 1 star. You want to have her as close to the enemy carries as possible so they might get polymorphed. In this example, Xayah will get polymorphed by a 2-star Lulu. Another way to play Lulu is to keep her close to your carry. This way if infiltrators or an Irelia dashes in, they will get CC'd. So she's either used to CC the threats to your carry, or to CC the enemy carries themselves. Thresh pulls in more units onto your board. If you have high impact units that you need to pull in, consider backlining him or protecting him more to make sure he ults. At 2-star, he is usually tanky enough to be frontline and ult once. Urgot targets the farthest away unit. His ult works just like Caitlyn's ult, meaning that if it gets intercepted by another unit, that one gets pulled in instead. In this example, Urgot will target Jhin, but the mech intercepts and gets eaten by the Urgot instead. Xayah's ult targets random units, so you can't control who he targets, therefore you just have to protect him like any other carry. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions for the next video about positioning, leave them in the comments as I will go over the most asked there. And if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. It is filled with hundreds of other players who are hungry to climb. And if you want to get coached by me, the information is over there as well. Go follow my Twitch and Twitter as well. And as always, take care and see you in the next video.